Hey everybody, what's going on? Nate Agentis here, and you're watching Virtual Plumber. We're at Agentis Kitchen and Bath Showroom today, and we're going to be working in one of their kitchens. We're going to show you how to replace a sink strainer and trap if you look underneath your sink and you find one of those leaking. Let's take a look at the tools and the materials we're going to need today to take care of the job. The first tool you're going to need is a pair of pump pliers, then a basket strainer wrench, a tubing cutter, a lock nut wrench, then a regular screwdriver, our good friend the 6-inch adjustable wrench, a black marker, next a bucket and some rags to catch the water, and lastly a small trash bag. Now on to the materials we're going to need. Let's begin with a basket strainer, an 1.5-inch P-trap. You're also going to need an 1.5-inch flange tailpiece, a handful of 1.5-inch slip joint nuts and washers, some plumber's putty, and finally some pipe dope. Step 1, the proper material. Today we're going to be replacing the strainer, the P-trap, and the tailpiece. What's really important about the proper material is we need to determine what strainer works for your situation. So before you remove anything, make sure you take a good look underneath the sink. Today, we're going to be using a demo sink, and we're going to be showing you two types of strainers, a deep cup bell strainer and a shallow strainer. You're going to need to take a look at the depth between the sink and where the drain goes out the wall to see what room you have for which strainer. We always recommend the cup or bell strainer, but if you don't have that proper depth, you're going to have to go with the lock nut shallow one. Step 2, remove the strainer and remove the drainage. First you want to do is lay down a mat in the area. This not only protects the customer's flooring and the cabinet area, but it also gives you a place to set your tools. Then we're going to shut off the water to the sink. Go to the valve, give it a turn, and shut it off. Now get your bucket and place it under the sink and get ready to catch the water. Now loosen the slip joint nuts on the trap of the J-bend. Once both nuts are loose and disconnected, you will be able to gently wiggle off the J-bend from the tailpiece. Now loosen the outlet side of the trap. When you pull the trap arm out of the marvel connection in the wall, you're going to want to have your rag nearby to catch that sludge. Loosen and remove the slip joint nut connecting the tailpiece to the basket strainer. Now it's time to remove the basket strainer. If you have a lock nut strainer, you're going to need your basket strainer wrench and your lock nut wrench. If it's a bell or cup strainer, you're going to need your basket strainer wrench and your pump pliers. Once you decide what wrenches you're going to use one wrench to hold back and use the other wrench to turn counterclockwise. Sometimes with lock nut strainers, that nut at the top is not going to come off. In order to get it off, you're going to need to cut it off. And that you're going to be very careful you don't damage the sink. Once you get the nut off the basket strainer, you then can remove the basket strainer from the sink. Now we're going to clean up the sink. Scrape off and remove all the putty that's on the sink. Step 3, install the strainer. Like I said before, in our demo kitchen, we're going to install both types of strainers to show you how to put them in. Remove the proper basket strainer from the packing. Now take some plumber's putty and roll it out into a 3/8-inch diameter rope of putty. Take that putty and put it around the edge of that basket strainer body. Make sure there's no overlaps and get rid of all that extra putty. Now you're ready to set the strainer into the sink. Insert the strainer body into the mouth of the sink, pressing down firmly and squishing out any putty. Take the rubber washer for the strainer and put it around the strainer body. Now follow this with the paper washer against the rubber washer. If you're using the lock nut strainer, then put on the locking nut. If you're using the bell wash strainer, Now slide on the cup, followed by the small nut to hold it in place. Hand tighten the strainer in place, making sure everything lines up. Now using your wrenches, hold back with one wrench and with the other wrench turn clockwise, tightening the strainer snugly to the sink. Now as you're tightening the strainer, some of that putty is going to get squeezed out. Just clean that putty out of the sink. Step 4, install the drainage. Now we're going to install the trap and the tailpiece. On our demo sink, we're going to show you 2 types of tailpieces, one for a dishwasher and one for without. Our trap and tailpieces connect with 1.5 inch slip joint fittings. These do not require a precise fit. When engaging a slip joint fitting, a 1/2 inch is still adequate for a watertight joint. First, we're going to connect the 2 halves of the P-trap with the slip joint nut. Position the trap in the area where the tailpiece will connect. Hold the flange tailpiece against the bottom of the basket strainer next to the trap. Now grab your Sharpie and mark on the tailpiece approximately 1/4 inch above the bottom socket of the inside of the trap. This is where the tailpiece will need to be cut. Now remove the trap and set it aside for now and grab your tubing cutter. Take the tubing cutter or a hacksaw if you don't have one and cut the tailpiece to the proper length. Place the slip joint nut from the basket strainer assembly onto the tailpiece. Apply a thin layer of pipe dope. Take the flanged washer and place it onto the flanged end of the tailpiece. And again, add a little pipe dope. Now attach the tailpiece to the bottom of the basket strainer. Hand tighten this. Disconnect the 2 halves of the trap and grab some slip joint nuts and washers for the P-trap. Slide 1 slip joint nut and 1 washer onto the tailpiece. Slide the 2nd slip joint nut onto the outlet half of the trap. As usual, place a thin layer of pipe dope where the slip joint washers will connect. Slip the J-bend onto the tailpiece and loosely connect the slip joint nut to the J-bend. Hand tighten all the slip joints. Lastly, grab your pump pliers and we're going to tighten up all the slip joint nuts, including the one connected to the strainer body. Step 5, test your work. Run the water and preliminary test for leaks. Make sure nothing's coming out of any of those slip joint connections. Once you don't see any leaks, now fill up the sink to about 3/4 high. Let that water out and that'll be a large volume of water to really test out that basket strainer and the drainage. Sometimes you might make a little adjustment or have to tighten some things up. If everything's good, let that sink drain and you can turn off the water. Your work is complete. Now remember, all good plumbers clean up all their tools and materials from the job site. All right guys, let's review our steps. Step 1, proper material. Step 2, remove the strainer and the drainage. Step 3, install the strainer. Step 4, install the drainage. Step 5, test your work. Okay everyone, I hope you learned a thing or two. Thanks for being with us. May all your plumbing projects be a success. Check out our channel for more videos like this, and we'll see you soon.